Good evening. I'm Vice Chair Greg Musil, and Chair Jerry Cook is very, very ill and could not make it tonight, so I'd like to call the January meeting of the Board of Trustees to order. And if you'd help me honor America by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First thing I want to do on the agenda is to announce that during the old business, we will continue a brief discussion about the sabbatical program, which was raised last meeting when we had on our consent agenda the 10 sabbaticals for the 2015-2016 school year. I don't anticipate any action being taken, but simply a continuation of that discussion. Roll call and recognition of visitors.
Okay, this evening's visitors include Dick Carter, Nancy Ingram, and Melody Rail.
Welcome back, former trustee Rail.
Thank you, Trustee Musil.
It's particularly good to have you here on that side of the podium. We miss you up here. Awards and recognitions.
We have 2 awards tonight. Dr. Korb, could you take the first one?
The first individual that we would like to recognize is Phil Wegman. And Phil is the Program Director for Skills Enhancement and Continuing Education, and he has been honored as the 2014 Servant Leader. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is. Phil was a participant in the Johnson County Community College Leadership Institute and received this award at their graduation in December. The award is presented to a member of the leadership graduating class that demonstrates service to the community beyond the college, displays remarkable leadership within the Institute program, and participates with thoughtful engagement, enthusiasm, passion, and positivity, and exemplifies a servant leader. And so Phil was honored with this award because he demonstrated all of those characteristics, not only in the Leadership Institute, but I've worked with Phil for years and have seen that over and over throughout the years as he's worked here. This award was developed in honor of David Kennedy, who was a computer lab supervisor here and was a member of the 2008 Leadership Institute class, and he died in 2009. And so the class put together this award because David exemplified those characteristics. They put together this award to kind of carry that on in his memory. Congratulations, Phil.
I just want to say thank you. It was a great honor to have been chosen as the servant leader in our leadership group, and I was served with a outstanding group of other individuals. So again, I'm humbled and very honored to have this award. Thank you again, Phil.
And I would like to ask Terry Murphy-Lotta to come forward and talk to us about the Golden Spike Award.
I don't think I've ever had so many questions over something as I've had over the Golden Spike, and it's really not gold, so I will let you know. The Golden Spike was presented to Johnson County Community College, to the NARS program, on September 30th of 2014 at the ceremonial signing of our new NARS program that is beginning at Carl Sandburg College in Galesburg. And in honor of all the work that the college has done and the support that they have given not only the NARS program but Galesburg, they asked me to give this to the board in appreciation and thanks for everything.
Thank you. Would you tell everybody what NARS is? So
NARS is the National Academy.
Acronym.
The National Academy of Railroad Sciences. And we do railroad training here at the college. We're also moving out to Galesburg, Topeka. I spoke to Haber, Montana. I'm going to talk to them. They have said yes, they want to move forward. And I met with Scott Schaefer with BNSF about a week, it's probably been about 3 weeks ago now that I think it's a week and a half ago. There are 12 more colleges that they want to expand the NARS program to. So We'll probably have a lot of golden spikes, and we can probably make our own railroad here, so. I think this is one of the perfect examples of a workforce partnership, and the things that we learned from 2011 to now, to working with Topeka, working with Tanya on the contracts, and working with Havre, Montana. It's not only here in our partners here in Johnson County, but we're moving to other states and other communities that we can be really proud of all the things that we've done with this partnership. So I thank you all.
The next item on the agenda is our open forum. The open forum section of the board agenda is a time for members of the community to provide comments to the board. There will be one open forum period during each regularly scheduled board meeting. Comments are limited to 5 minutes unless a significant number of people plan to speak. In that instance, the chair may limit a person's comments to less than 5 minutes. In order to be recognized, individuals must register at the door at each board meeting prior to the open forum agenda item. When addressing the board, registered speakers should be respectful and civil and should not address matters related to individual personnel matters with the college. I do not believe we have any registered speakers tonight, so we will close the open forum period. The next item is you're looking at me funny because I skipped and went out of order. I apologize. I'm new to this. College lobbyist report. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Trustee Musil. Fairly brief report this evening, and so that should keep most people happy. We are off and running, and usually what we do the first week of the legislative session is point bathrooms out to newcomers and kind of help folks navigate their way around the building, and this year is really no different. We also hear updates or annual reports from different legislative or cabinet level agencies. And so that's kind of what we do for the first week or two of the legislative session as things begin to get ramped up. As you are aware, there is a lot of heavy air in Topeka as it relates to the state's budget. And so there is already plans being made and proposed, and we'll hear later on this evening. In fact, as soon as I get done with my report, I'll probably head out because the governor will be making his State of the State speech this evening, and people who do what I do like to listen word for word and analyze the text and send those messages on to folks that we report to. And so I'll be doing that later on this evening. But you can be certain that we'll be dealing with significant budget issues in the coming weeks. First of all, we have to deal with the $280 million gap this year. And then the $435 million gap is what we'll be looking at as things move forward. We've already heard lots of talks of significant cuts to programs. We've already received the governor's allotment memo, which deals with about $73 million in real money. There's another $207 million or so that's sort of a one-time transfer that helps just in the calendar year, or the fiscal year 2015, which we're currently in. However, if those changes are approved by the legislature, the ones that need legislative approval, we're now talking about a $648 million hole in fiscal year 2016. And so the problem sort of continues to grow, and we're just talking about filling the gap, not covering the cost of anything that might be needed in the future of state government. The other thing to keep in mind is that the numbers that we're talking about and dealing with to date do not take into account the Gannon decision that was just handed down, which will most likely be appealed. But again, that number has been talked about in the neighborhood of $550 million. We do believe that there'll be some form of discussion on the K-12 funding formula. I don't think the governor will necessarily propose one, but we may see one in that comes out of the House or the Senate for that matter in terms of discussion. The other thing that's not being talked about, and again, when things like this happen, we have to take all the pieces and put them together to form the puzzle so that we can see the big picture, and that is the severance tax on oil and gas hadn't really been taken into account, at least as far as when the budget Consensus Revenue Estimating Group met in November, and when they were giving the projections of what the budget looked like, oil was still at a high dollar per barrel, and that has decreased significantly. So commensurate with that decrease, the taxes don't flow at the same level as well. So we anticipate a fairly significant gap as a result of that as well if the per barrel oil price continues to remain low. So where do we go from here? Like I said before, the people who do what I do and that live and breathe this are sort of waiting for the speech tonight. We'll spend the next week or two sort of figuring out just exactly what the governor's budget recommendations look like and where that money comes from. And quite frankly, it could be several weeks before we're able to actually pinpoint where some of the revenue sources come from. But I think that we can anticipate that there will be continued cuts, continued elimination of certain tax exemptions. We know for sure that there will be significant sweeps from KDOT. We anticipate that we'll return to bonding out state expenses so that we can get the cash now and pay for it as we go along. And I think that we won't hear about that in the speech this evening, but those are the things that we'll be seeing as the budget proposals begin to see the light of day. So it continues to look worse than we think that it is, or that I've been reporting, or that you hear or read, and I think that it will continue to get darker as we move through the legislative session. The one good news piece is that there will be an introduction of the bill that corrects the GED accelerator problem and includes Johnson County Community College. And that bill introduction will occur most likely in the Senate Education Committee. I know that the revisers are finalizing the details on that bill for its introduction. And I suppose the bad piece of news that comes with that is there might not be funding to cover the gap. So I'm just going to be brief and stop there. It's all about the budget for this evening. There are other bills that are beginning to make their way into the hopper, as we call it, and I'll be reporting on those in coming meetings. And certainly there are some that are already out there that will have an impact on local units of government like yourself. So I'll stop there.
I'm going to Dr. Sopcich, and then if board members have questions.
Dick, I was just going to ask, any discussion about cuts that would occur in this fiscal year, and when might we know about cuts that will occur for next fiscal year?
We're not hearing any presently. We've not seen any recommendations from the governor's office on cuts to higher education in the current fiscal year. Having said that, the board office will take a 4% cut like all of the other state agencies. They've passed that along in the past to some of the institutions that are under that umbrella. That would be us, Washington University, technical colleges. I don't think that's going to happen. It's a fairly minimal amount, at least for the board office is concerned. But again, once we open up those budget hearings, it's anybody's guess because they have to figure out a way to fill $280 million today. Moving forward for 2016, I'm anticipating that we could see a cut. If they figure out how to approve the governor's recommendations for the allotment process, and that number does go to $648 million, that's 10% of the state budget. So if you spread that across the board, which you cannot do for K-12 education and some of the agencies that have a tie to a federal mandate or a caseload, for example, you can't cut some agencies 10%. And so that number then fluctuates depending on where the pots of money are. And higher education is where one of those pots of money is.
Trustee Sharp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question, and you may have said it and I may have missed it. What is the fiscal note, the cost on our chunk of that GED bill?
I don't know that I know that specific piece, and I did not say that.
Thank you.
Other questions? I will note, later in the management committee report, I was going to mention that in our budget allocation or budget report, it was noted that we had assumed a 5% cut this year and a 5% cut next year. So we have attempted to be ahead of the curve, if you will, but those numbers are more dismal, I think, than we thought they would be at the time we made those projections.
Far more fluid.
Okay. The Gannon decision refers to the 3 district court judges who ruled on the school finance, and that will undoubtedly be appealed onto the Supreme Court. So no one knows if we'd have a decision from the court on the constitutionality of the funding formula until maybe after this session.
Correct, and I think we pushed that down the road, awaiting the appeal, and who knows how long that takes. And then the other issue could be, do we see some tweaks in the funding formula that maybe get them past some potential problem that they might have with funding levels?
There are no other questions. Thank you. You may head to Topeka and the governor's State of the State
Thank you,
address.
sir.
Committee reports and recommendations. The first one is collegial steering. There was no collegial steering meeting during January as the campus was not closed down, but quiet, and we gave everybody a break for January. Human Resources did not meet. Is that right?
These meetings were originally scheduled literally the first couple days back after break, and so it was thought that it would be in all of our interests to wait until next month to conduct those meetings.
Okay. Learning Quality,
There was no Learning Quality Committee meeting, Mr. Vice Chair. It did not meet this month, however, several items were shared electronically and are being carried forward on this month's consent agenda. First, the two recommendations discussed at the December committee meeting are being moved forward. These recommendations include a recommendation to approve the affiliation agreement change that transfers Carondelet Health to Prime Healthcare, and a recommendation to approve the K-State Salina Aviation Agreement. The college's concurrent enrollment partnership cooperative agreements were shared electronically with the Learning Quality Committee for informational purposes. In addition, several curriculum items that have gone through the Ed Affairs process were shared online with the LQ Committee and are being moved forward for board approval. Finally, the Learning Quality Committee congratulates Roz Bethke, did I say that right? Professor Reading and Academic Achievement Center, whose Professor Emeritus status has been approved. The next Learning Quality Committee meeting will be held at 8 a.m. on Monday, February 2nd, 2015, in GEB 137. And that concludes my report, thankfully prepared by staff. Thank you, Mr. Vice.
any questions of Trustee Cross? Management Committee report. The Management Committee met at 8 a.m. on January 7th. It's pages 1 through 12 in the board packet. We have one recommendation that requires action, and that is a recommendation related to our ongoing agreements between the community college and the secondary schools, the high schools in our area, where we have concurrent enrollment partnership courses, more commonly known as College Now. We have to have a written agreement with those. We've updated that agreement so that it is consistent, and it is a recommendation that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of college administration to approve the agreement between Johnson County Community College and participating College Now high schools, and I make that motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That will be passed unanimously. The Management Committee also received two presentations. The first was by Susan Ryder on a financial ratio analysis that we have done at least annually, showing the financial state of the college. I think the highlights of the 5-year presentation demonstrate that we're on the right track and a better track towards strengthening our financial position. And after the meeting, we were presented with a 10-year report, as Trustee Stewart requested, and that, I think, demonstrated that for the first 5 or 6 years of this process, of that 10 years, we were on a downward slide with respect to those ratios. Doesn't mean we were in trouble necessarily, but we have strengthened the balance sheet in terms of those financial ratios over the past several years. We had a second presentation by Denise Moore regarding the independent assessment of our Information Services Department and our technology on campus. It was conducted by Barry Dunn from July to December of 2014 and presented 14 separate recommendations to enhance organizational effectiveness and efficiencies within information services. Denise also provided her quarterly report on everything that goes on with information services on campus, including additional fiber efforts and all our border security and everything else that we try to do. We had a detailed report on the college's insurance program, property, casualty, all the things that Tom Clayton handles. Don Perkins reviewed the budget reallocations that occurred in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. Those are on page 3 and 4 of your board packet. He reported on the projected deficit for the state general fund, which Mr. Carter just also reported on, and he reported that our plans to plan for a 5% cut this year and a 5% cut next year. Mitch Borders presented the sole source report and a summary of the awarded bids between $25,000 and $100,000. That summary is on page 2. If I recall right, there were 2 bids. Both of them were low bids. Rex Hayes reported on the monthly update on capital infrastructure project. That's on page 5. And that concluded the presentations at the meeting. Do either Trustee Stewart or Trustee Lindstrom have anything to add?
Yeah, I might just comment on the financial ratios. Vice Chair Musil talked about the ratios were deteriorating for, if we go back 10 years, they were, well, the reason was the recession, and you may or may not know that the demands on our services increase during high unemployment as more people come back to get skills training and go to school. And so now that we're in a period of time where the economy is improving, then we should be able to improve those ratios. But I guess the point that I make is that it really accentuates the necessity to have adequate reserves and to make sure that we do have a level of reserves, because we have to weather the storms, and we don't want to bring those reserves down so much that we can't get through another period like this. Hopefully we don't see one for a while, but there will be one that comes, and so we're on the right track now, and we did what we needed to do during the recession. We spent down the reserves to make sure we could provide the services here at the college. So just want to make that point.
I think, Dr. Sopcich, you made the point, too, during the meeting that as much as we feel sometimes like we squeeze and cut and trim, raising the mill levy by 0.75 mils 2 fiscal years ago also contributed significantly to the uptick in our current financial ratios. So the last thing that we did at the management committee meeting, I think it's appropriate to do here, is we recognized Don Perkins and Denise Moore for their years of service at the college. They were not as sad as we were that was their last management committee meeting. Both of their leadership has contributed to the success of this college. Denise for 5 years, Don for over 25 years. And so I want to thank them for their commitment to the college. If there are 2 things, I know we all like to think what we do is most important, but if we don't have an information technology system on campus, none of us can do our functions. And if we don't take care of the budget and watch what we do financially, which is what Don did for over 25 years, nothing's going to work either. So I just want to recognize you publicly, thank you for your service, and offer other trustees an opportunity to, they want to make any comments.
Yeah, I think I've said it in past board meetings, certainly in the management committee meeting, that I worked with Don Perkins for many, many years, and he's a consummate professional. He's answered our questions, no matter how simple they were, and he's done a fantastic job of providing us a solid financial base and information to make decisions on. So wish you well, Don. And Denise, you've done such a good job of keeping us out of the news. Everyone around us seems to be getting hacked and have all sorts of issues, and we have avoided that, and I think it's because of your leadership, and wish you well, and job well done. Thank you.
We can't do what we do up here without the faculty and staff that are here, and so we really do appreciate it. This is not pro forma. We trust you guys. We appreciate the hard work you put in and the leadership you provide. So just 2 more examples of great personnel here on campus. We're next moving to the President's recommendations for action. Trustee Lindstrom, do you have a treasurer's report?
I do. Before I start, I just want to echo some of the comments that were made in that regard to Don and Denise, and then also on the ratios. It is a wonderful way for me to take a look at the financial viability of the institution too. So I appreciate both of those last comments. I'm pleased to present the Treasurer's report for the month ending November 30th, 2014, which can be found on pages 13 through 24. Briefly, here are a few highlights. On page 23 at the bottom of the page, please note that fund balances as of November 30th, we had a book balance of $65.6 $15.5 million, with $15.8 million in outstanding encumbrances, leaving us an unencumbered balance of $49.7 million. The college made payment 18 of 32 in the Series 2006 revenue bonds, payment 7 of 33 on the Series 2001 revenue bonds, and payment 4 of 30 in the Series 2012 revenue bonds. These payments totaled $1,435,511 and are reflected in the Plants Fund sections of the Treasurer's report. The college made payment 6 of 8 annual payments in the amount of $666,635 on the PEI loan, and expenditures in the primary operating fund are within approved budgetary limits. It is the recommendation, therefore, of the college administration that the Board of Trustees approve the Treasury's report for the month ending November 2014, subject to audit, and I would make that motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to accept the treasurer's report for audit. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Next item is the monthly report to the board. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Trustee Musil. I have to say that we haven't had a board meeting move with such efficiency since Trustee Rail was at the helm. So we're glad you could witness this.
Are you done?
A few things here. First, there will not be a lightning round tonight. Sorry to disappoint you. But we'll go on. Today is January 15th. And I'd like to ask those of you who have been around Kansas City for a little while, what happened 48 years ago on January 15th? The Kansas City Chiefs played in the first Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers. And it's a date that I'll always remember because that was a big deal. So I just got nostalgic, so I thought I would throw that in, if that's okay.
I completely forgot about that.
Remember that? Yeah.
I thought it was when you were
48
born.
years.
She was not born.
We got off to an exciting start yesterday within service. We were interrupted by a fire drill, and then we're very happy to report that everyone evacuated promptly and efficiently, and everyone came back. So that was truly a testament to what was going on stage. What had happened there was that the construction project in the police department, someone had tripped a wire, one of the fire alarms in there, and that's what set everything off.
I understand it was Andy Anderson trying to shorten his presentation.
Right. Our in-service program was created, written, directed, and produced by the students. Second-year student, Gene Cantero, he emceed the event, and 5 members of our faculty and staff were selected by and honored by the students themselves. Those 5 were staff members Aiping Chen from the International Immigration Student Services area, Carrie Scala from Records, faculty members Stephanie Zabato from Graphic Design, Daniel Kramer, an adjunct in speech, and also Jane Holtzrichter, who is an adjunct in practical nursing. It was a terrific ceremony, and I know Julie Haas, Karen Martley, all very much involved in making that come off, so our hats are off to them. It was an excellent program. Additionally, at this time in service, we have professional development days. There were close to 70 sessions that were conducted during yesterday, today, and on Friday. And I'll give you an example, just a random sample of a few of those sessions. First of all, one is entitled, How to Integrate Your Assessment Data Through Analysis. How about customizing your D2L homepage and creating custom weights? Thought you might have an interest in these. You can always come back. We still have a few tomorrow. We had a lot of strategic planning updates. Those are outstanding, and it was great to see the interest and enthusiasm that has gone into these. It's also fascinating to watch how many of them are lining themselves up with the key performance indicators, which is exactly the intent. We also had a session on how to navigate our complaint process, because we want to make sure that people who have complaints know exactly how to navigate the process to make those complaints. I know that's an interest of yours. And also, I survived my first road race by Dr. Jay Antle. So these are just a few of the professional day sessions, and they're outstanding. They really are. You have before you a president's report that is 19 pages long, and I'd like to share with you a few of the highlights. For example, if you look at the entrepreneurship department, you'll see that Donna Duffy made a presentation to 13 Olathe North High School business students. If you go down the page, you'll see our career and technical education folks, Jenny Naglick primarily. She was out at Shawnee Mission North and spoke to over 250 students regarding business-related courses. On December 2nd, she was at the Olathe Area Technical Center and enrolled students into our auto classes here at the college. On December 3rd, Jenny spoke to 30 students at Horizons High School, which is part of the Shawnee Mission School District. On the 5th, spoke to over 60 students in fashion classes at Olathe North. On December 10th and 11th, she spoke to over 100 students who were interested in career and technical education majors at Olathe Northwest. And on December 12th, Jenny spoke to over 100 students in family and consumer science classes at Blue Valley North. If you go to page 4, you'll see that at OHEC, that's out in Olathe, we hosted 60 people for the Adult Education GED All-Staff meeting on January 9th. If you go on to page 9, the continuing education recently signed a contract with Clorox to train production operators on site in Spring Hill, at the Spring Hill plant, where they manufacture kitty litter products. If you look at what continuing ed has done as far as contract training in this past fiscal year, $1.2 million in billing, 169 contracts with 95 clients. Terrific outreach into the community. Our police department, over the past year, responded to 2,245 calls for recovered property. And in 2015, we're looking, they're going to have a garage sale and lay out a bunch of that recovered property so everyone would have a chance. No, that's not true. They're going to launch a program where they, is that correct, Officer?
I don't believe they're going to do a garage.
They're going to launch a program how they can return those items. On page 15, Career and Development Center, 67 enrolled in workshops and 41 actually attended in career workshops. And in 2014, over 70 employer recruiters visited our campus for the purpose of hiring students, over 70. Our counseling center saw 2,840 student contacts during the month of November and dealt with 1,815 incoming calls. The point of all this is that there is a lot of great work going on, and you can see that when we look at our enrollment numbers. And right now, we seem to be holding in there pretty well. We're not going to give any specific numbers at this point because there's still time for fluctuation, but that's the result of a lot of hard work by many, many people across this campus. Oh, one last thing. Today, we had a competitive technology event on campus. We had over 600 high school students from 10 school districts and 19 schools competing in a variety of events. Absolutely fantastic. They were all in the Commons area over noon at lunchtime dining. But it was wonderfully exciting to have that many high school students on campus here at the same time. In the Treasurer's Report, if you've looked at that, Trustee Lindstrom reported on it, revenues are up in the general fund over $300,000 over a year ago at $33,363,000, and that's an increase of 1%. And expenses are down 1%. So whenever you can keep expenses down and revenues up, that's a good sign. Again, that reflects a lot of great work. We'll take a closer look at the reserve number on December 31st at the low point. That's what we always do. That's kind of the barometer. And that's when we want to do that. And there's been a lot of talk about President Obama's announcement of 2 years of free community college. And we've got a lot of calls about that, a lot of interest. It is a very complicated proposal. Rest assured that there are two sides to that. I know that I have a Ledger interview tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to talking to the reporter about that. But the bottom line is that this institution and every community college across the country is thrilled when the spotlight is put on the community colleges in a positive light, with the fact that community colleges contribute to our local and our national economy in a big way. And that is what that announcement has done. It's really drawn the focus on community colleges, and that's great. Lastly, I would like to recognize Denise Moore for her incredible service here. If you looked in the board report, there's a very comprehensive presentation of the status of our various IS projects and the investment fund. It's so comprehensive that we usually just skirt over it because we have all the confidence in the world that that's a very accurate portrayal of where we stand. And Denise, that's a reflection of you and the great job that you've done during your time here at Johnson County Community College, and we want to thank you for that. And for Don Perkins, I had the pleasure of working with Don back in October of 1992 when I arrived here. Don was in the Internal Audit Department, an department of one, and he was also the foundation's accountant. And from the very beginning, Don's ethics and his straightforwardness, his approach to how he managed the books, and the advice that he gave to us was exemplary. And so, Don, we'll miss you, and best of luck. I want to thank you very much. Despite all the wonderful things you did in that capacity, I thought your performance at in-service on the stage with your guitar could have been your one of your professional highlights. So we want to thank you for your service, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And that concludes my report.
Questions for the president or comments on the report? I have a comment. I want to direct this to the English Department's Common Read Committee. They should pick The Destiny of the Republic, A Tale of Madness, Medicine, and the Murder of a President as the book for 2015-2016. Anybody here from the English Department?
I'll take that word.
Great book. About President Garfield and lots of science, lots of politics, lots of humanity involved in that. So when I saw that, I just felt like I had to bring it up. All right, we're ready for old business, and there is one item of old business, as I mentioned earlier. Last month, we, as part of the consent agenda of the board, approved sabbaticals for the 2015-2016 school year. I think there have been some questions because we don't see that until it comes to the board, and questions about the process. And Trustee Stewart, did you have some questions you wanted to, again, discuss tonight?
Yeah, I last month pulled it off the consent agenda because I thought it warranted some discussion instead of just a simple vote. And I guess that maybe I've stirred it up a little bit among the faculty and the faculty association and others, maybe the counselors. And I guess I'm happy about that I've done that, because I think that we need to question what is going on at the college, that this board and other boards, maybe we haven't asked enough questions. We have a lot of votes here where you don't have a discussion, and I think people watching on TV may wonder, do we really thoroughly look at everything? And we have committees that do that. So I'm glad I got this discussion going. And first I would say, I am not criticizing sabbaticals. I'm not criticizing the committee for who they chose. My point was, I believe the fiscal note tied to sabbaticals, under the bargaining agreement, we have 10. They have the ability to offer 10 or grant 10 sabbaticals. And that's 6 months, so that's about a half a salary of a faculty member or counselor. I think it's a $500,000 fiscal note. Now, some may disagree because, you know, that the faculty member is off. We have to hire someone to come in and teach those classes or counsel. And so there is a significant cost. So whatever it is, whether it's $500,000 or more, or whether it's the $170,000 to pay for the replacements to come and teach, that's a big number and it should be questioned. How many faculty members, full-time faculty? We have 300?
We have over 300.
Over 300. We had 13 applicants for 10 grants. I don't think it's competitive enough, and I think the Faculty Association and the faculty should come up with a process that makes it more competitive and gets more applicants involved in it. I know that I had a chance, Dr. Jim Leiker reached out to me, and I had a chance to grab a cup of coffee with him and talk about sabbaticals, and he educated me a little bit on things that I wasn't aware of, and I educated him a little bit on where I was coming from. But he mentioned that last year you only granted 8 sabbaticals. So again, I'm not questioning. I mean, last year, obviously, I don't know how many you had that applied for sabbaticals last year, but you didn't grant the full 10, so there is a process in place to cover those. But I think the suggestion was made that instead of just coming to the board as a consent agenda, it should probably go through learning quality so that there is some more information, and maybe those board members could see the applicants and at least have some more data behind what they're voting on. My main concern, and I made the comment that there were several that I know since I've been on the board the last 11 years that have had sabbaticals before. You can take a sabbatical every 7 years or apply for one. And so that kind of gets back to how competitive is this process, and is it the same people just applying year after or every 7 years, and how do you expand that pool? And I understand some people don't want to take a sabbatical. There's a lot of work involved in that. But my concern was, I've been on the board long enough, and I've heard how taxed counselors are, particularly in the fall semester, because they're dealing, I appreciate counselors, they're dealing with a lot of issues. And when I saw that we had 3 counselors, full-time counselors going on sabbatical in the fall, that raised a red flag to me as what is the quality of counseling. You know, obviously they're 3 of our best counselors. Is that going to create some quality issues in that department? I understand a little more from talking to Joe and Judy that when the counselors apply for their sabbatical, they don't know if 1 or 3 or any of them will be granted sabbatical, so they all put down the fall of 2015 and then they're granted. I think there should be some more thought put into, yeah, let's grant the sabbatical, but maybe one could go in the spring and make sure that those departments are not understaffed, or at least the quality of the department doesn't go down. So those are the reason I raised those questions last month. I fully support sabbaticals. I think it's great. I think there should be a benefit for the college, and I know that some may argue that it shouldn't be a benefit to the college, but it should be, because if you go on a sabbatical, it ought to be for something that improves that faculty member or that counselor, that when they come back to the college, they're a better counselor or a better teacher, and they pass that knowledge on to students and the staff and people here at the college. So used to be, again, because I've been on the board for a while, we used to get a report from the podium of one or several of those that were granted sabbaticals. And I think that stopped during Terry Calloway's tenure here, that for whatever reason, and I know we don't want to probably hear all 10 every year, but I think there ought to be some more follow-up, some more, I think they have to write a report, or supposed to write a report on what they did. Those things ought to be made public, and that there ought to be a benefit. So that's why I raised the whole issue. I think it's a significant amount of money we're dedicating, and it could be very beneficial, but we need to, I think, make more people aware, and I'd like to see it be more competitive and more people apply for those.
Trustee Cross.
Yes, if I may. Thank you, Trustee Stewart, very much. How is it that the Learning Quality Committee could review this in closer detail if they want to? I think he raises a good point.
I think one of the things we've talked about is that nobody last month or this month has ever expressed a doubt about the value of a sabbatical program. It's kind of the process, and I know for me, one of the things, when I get something in my board packet that hasn't gone through any committee, I try to give that more scrutiny. In this case, there wasn't more to give. I couldn't do any more last month. So I think one of the things that we hopefully can discuss, is collegial steering or otherwise, is a process whereby, since the board has ultimate approval, and I don't think we've ever turned anybody down, but Learning Quality would take a look at it first, and we could do that simply as a matter of administrative procedure, I believe.
But if I may ask, and with all the rights, privileges, and prestige that comes from being chair of the Learning Quality Committee, I mean, may I ask for a briefing on this at our next meeting so that we can understand the process better?
I suspect that would be
Absolutely,
welcomed
sure.
by everybody, because part of the problem, I think, is that we up here don't have a good understanding of the process, because it's always been a consent agenda item, and we haven't, maybe it's our fault, but we can clarify that and get more information and understand and measure the value of the program better than we've done in the past.
It would be fairly easy to do, just like all the recommendations that go through the various subcommittees. This would be no different. It's actually kind of fascinating because the applications and the types of sabbaticals are interesting. And I would think the Learning Qualities Committee would probably enjoy that opportunity to review the breadth and the depth of some of those applications.
Mr.
But
President,
they would receive the recommendation. They wouldn't be making the judgments on who gets those. It's just you'd review it just like any other recommendation to the board.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Trustee Stewart.
And I fully understand that, I think that number used to be 20.
I think it was 18. It's
18.
up to 18.
Up to 18, and that's been reduced over the last 5 years down to 10, so that has been reduced. But again, I support sabbaticals. I just want to make sure the process is competitive and that there is a benefit to the school, to the community.
If I could just
Dr. Korb?
address a couple of those, because, John, yes, your questions did prompt some conversation over the last few days. So, yes, so just a couple of things that I would like to mention, and one being that there was some discussion around whether or not sabbaticals provide the benefit to the college. And at our last meeting, I was trying to remember, because I thought I remembered a portion of the application that actually speaks directly to that. I did go back and pull the application and actually look at some of the applications that were submitted. And there is a section in there that really the individual describes what their professional benefit is, but also then what the benefit link back to the college. Many of the individuals did tie their application directly to the strategic goals of the college, and so they were able to show a direct impact on whatever it is that they were doing and how that would help advance those strategic goals. Or there was a section on benefit to the college, so it is something that is at least considered there. I know another concern was the number of sabbaticals in one area, and we have had that has come up before, where the number of sabbaticals that are granted, and it ends up there's a concentration in an area. This did allow us an opportunity to go back. I visited with the 3 counselors that have been granted a sabbatical, and we haven't reached final conclusions there, but each one of them indicated a willingness to look at the schedule and look at, their proposal and how that might fit and what we might be able to do to make sure that we adjusted so that we would not have an issue there if there was a concern. So I believe that there's a willingness to kind of take a look at that. I also pulled, just so that I could refresh my own memory, the process that they do go through, and this would be what we would be able to review in greater detail in learning quality, but there's a complete list of questions, there's a grid, there's a rating scale that the faculty members use, and all of that, we could present all of that so that you would be able to see exactly what process is currently in place. As I talk to some people about why we have low numbers sometimes in the number of people that apply, one of the reasons for that is because the process is very rigorous, and it takes a lot of work to prepare for just the application process and going through that. And so sometimes individuals have a difficult time even getting the time together to do that. But that's also something that we could look at in the overall. Those were some of the results of the conversations that have taken place just over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and again, it's been a good process for me to understand how sabbaticals are granted, and I'm not criticizing the committee. I looked at those, or I don't know that I understand all of those sabbaticals, but I assume the committee does, and there's some that looked awfully interesting to me and I think can provide a lot of benefit. So, but I think it's good that the rest of the board understands the thoroughness that goes through in that committee. But when we come to an up or down vote on a consent agenda for a significant financial expenditure, I think we ought to have a little more input or discussion, even though I don't think we should have the input as this is a good sabbatical or not. That should be the committee's duty. Ours should be more in the management and operation of the college. Are we putting our students at a inferior quality during this sabbatical? Then we may need to address that. But That's my point of bringing this up.
And Trustee Stewart, I'd like to thank you for raising this issue, and it's caused a lot of introspection and review of this whole program. But I would like to point out, and I'd like to commend those 3 individuals who have agreed to reconsider the timing and things like that. I think it's a lot of planning went into that, and it's no easy task when you have to reschedule all of the work and the appointments or whatever. But it really demonstrates a sense of putting the institution, putting the students first over self. And I think that is indicative of where we need to be, and I'd just like to thank them for that. So it's very important.
Great.
Mr. Vice Chair, just real quick.
Certainly.
I'd just like to verify with Trustee Stewart that his position on sabbaticals is that he wants to trust but verify, and he's not soft on sabbaticals.
I do not support sabbaticals for trustees.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
All right. Yeah, we concluded. Trustee Sharp.
I do have a final question. I'm curious, I'm very familiar with the sabbatical process at the academic faculty level. I would love to hear the reports back from the counseling staff. I'm curious how these sabbaticals will help facilitate their jobs and help our students do what they need to do. So I'd love to hear reports on those.
And I think it is fair to say that there are administrative staff that take sabbaticals as well, and that process ought to be held to the same accountability standards as far as the benefit to the college and a report on that as the faculty. And I've always understood that would be the same kind of, sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander, so to speak.
And that's one of the things that we could take an additional look at. Right now, when a person comes back from a sabbatical, they are required to do a report. And those reports they used to come to the board, at least they would do a brief little synopsis of it, but they turned in a written report as well. And we've talked about some different options for how we might be able to put those reports in a repository maybe where everybody could view them so that you would be able to read through and look at some of the accomplishments and how that worked out. So that's something that we can work on. What is the best way to do that? What's the best way to deliver it so that there is not only accountability, but the sharing of the knowledge and information that happens when a person's on sabbatical.
Well, and for trustees, we like to brag on you guys. I mean, we like those concrete examples of so-and-so went here and they did this and this is what happened when they came back. And those are some of the stories that we like to hear during the Faculty Association report as well, is we like to have those stories in our hands so that we can tell them. We have the little sheets that tell us all the names and numbers and the statistics, but the stories, I think, are the ones that really that get to people that know that their tax dollars are being well spent. So in that vein, it would be helpful. I love the idea of putting all of those in one website portal.
Trustee Cross.
Real quick, Mr. Vice Chair, and I concur with Trustee Sharp. Just one more plug for the Learning Quality Committee meeting. It'll be 8 a.m. Monday, February 2nd, 2015, NGEB 137. I'm not sure it'll be televised, so I just want to make sure people knew when it was.
Dr. Sopcich, are we about to the last word on this?
I was just going to ask Dr. Corbett, maybe by that learning qualities meeting, or when would it be possible to have some type of summary report on some of the things we've talked about?
Absolutely. We can do that, and I know that the chair of the Faculty Sabbatical Committee has offered to kind of give an overview of what it is that they go through and would know better exactly the process that they work through than I do even, but we can certainly arrange that. And I think it would be appropriate to do that in learning quality, and then when we actually bring forward sabbaticals again, if it goes through learning quality, there would be an opportunity for some additional questions to be asked around what some of those, those little paragraphs that you typically get. You could ask some more in-depth questions about some of those just to get a better understanding.
All right, I'm going to have the last word on this. This is speaking as one member of the board only, but this could have been in new business, because my understanding is that this board has started to ask a lot more questions than were asked maybe 10 years ago by the board. We've looked at more items in more depth, especially because of the financial constraints. We've asked more questions about things on agendas in the past. I consider that a good thing, and I hope people take it in that vein. There's nobody up here that is malicious in their questions. We may ask them too bluntly, we may ask them at the wrong time, we may ask them of the wrong person. But I think everybody's goal here was to better understand this, to make sure that we get the best interest of the college, the best interest of the students are served, whether it's a faculty sabbatical or an administrative sabbatical. So I know, Deb, I'm going to go through new business real quick, and then you're going to get a chance to speak on behalf of the association, and I assume you'll have some comments on this. But that's where I come from on this issue, or grants that we apply for or other things. We should be asking more questions rather than fewer, and that doesn't mean it's a challenge to any individual program. So is there any new business? If not, Faculty Association report. Dr. Williams.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm going to start with a handout. This is an item, I'll get to a couple of items down on my list, but first I'd like to say, express my gratitude to Ron Palcic for holding down the fort last semester while I was on sabbatical, so I can certainly address some of my own personal experiences with that process, procedure, and otherwise, but I'm prepared to provide, some examples, really, based on some conversations that I've had. I actually watched the board meeting last month, and so I was, kind of from my computer, wishing I was there to be available to provide some of the information I think I will provide tonight. But I also reached out to Anita Tebby, who was a past chair of the sabbatical committee, to Jeanette Finero, a past chair, long-term sabbatical committee chair, and there was a discussion that kind of got forwarded to a couple of other people who are current and future sabbatical committee chair members, and we had a really nice email dialogue to answer the inquiry that I sent, which is in response to Trustee Stewart's questions, which I interpreted as, you needed to know what the value added is, essentially. I mean, there's process questions which are really easy to answer when you take a look at the application, and if you read the master agreement, a lot of that detail is spelled out there. But in terms of what the value added is, I was thinking about that myself and what the value I can add based on my own experience and examples that as recently as yesterday, I sat in on a professional development day session with one of my colleagues in chemistry, Kevin Cannell, who his sabbatical project, I'll just jump right into it, was to develop essentially an online skills workshop, online rigorous comparable laboratory sessions for students. And the idea was not to recreate an online version of Principles of Chemistry, but rather if there were snow days or some event in the student's life and that might take them out of the class instead of being always behind the schedule, have something that's a suitable replacement. And so this was not something that would be easy to do on the job as he's teaching his 15 plus hours of coursework, but he had the time to develop this set of modules and workshops, very highly technology entailed. And he shared that with 12 faculty members. And so I started asking questions like, how many faculty members are impacted? And he said he shared it with his 6 full-time faculty colleagues and his 6 part-time faculty colleagues. I said, well, what's the reach of student? What's the head count of students impacted? And on average, about 450 students per semester. So value added, and in that sense, you could really, do the math and think about impact in terms of time saved, maybe performance enhanced by having these skill workshops or not having to worry so much about making up something while they're trying to continue with the current material. So I was just fascinated. I've taken chemistry courses, biology was my science major, and I was just thinking, wow, this would be cool. I wish I had the skills, number one, and the time and resources available that I could provide to my students, but I saw that immediately as a positive. Another that came to mind that was recently, and I know about this because Robert Murphy, a counselor, took a sabbatical last semester, and he asked me to write a letter of recommendation. And it was to develop a grief counseling, component to the counseling center. And can you imagine the impact to students? I mean, we have numerous examples that I could share about impacts that counselors make in way above advising and the typical, counselor-student relationship with regard to class selection and so on, because students that come into the counseling sessions usually sometimes have much more complicated issues, and we have trained counselors with credentials to meet those students if there's a crisis or refer. And but one area that was deemed to be potentially lacking was grief counseling. And that will impact students, that would impact staff, it would impact faculty. And so it was easy for me to write a letter of recommendation. I was very pleased that he was awarded a sabbatical, and I can't wait to see that program implemented and know, as we all do, common sense will tell us that that will make an institutional impact. So I guess an answer to essentially what is the value added, or what are you buying? What is that, $500,000, was it, how much did you say, was it $500,000 investment on average? So $500,000, and I can understand what do you get in return for that. What you're buying really is time, because time is important in order to be innovative and to allow faculty members and and counselors and librarians and administrators, for that matter, an opportunity to develop resources, maybe pursue an advanced degree, to invest in large-scale community and campus impacting programs like the Grief Counseling Center. And all these things may be ideas in our mind that we wish we had time to do, but we have a job to do. We have to focus on our students or our advisees, or the resource is providing resources for people that come into the library. And so we need, I'm glad, I was very happy to hear that the scrutiny wasn't really on the sabbatical, the idea of a sabbatical, offering sabbaticals themselves. But I'm also very thankful to have the questions, because it highlights something that I consider personally. I know it's a highly coveted professional development activity, and professional development is broadly defined, and any person, as you hear these reports, can step up here and tell you how they were personally impacted by the time that they had to develop themselves, to publish. We've had faculty members who wrote books, and what I've asked of my colleagues who served on this committee is, how many books were created as a result of sabbaticals, or publications, or national presentations given, or advanced degrees earned, or programs and projects created, and that data is forthcoming. I also got some real interesting feedback on the FA listserv about, in terms of making that information available. If you attend the professional development days and see those listed, that's one way. Hearing the reports to divisions and departments is one way. We have a repository, electronic repository in the library that welcomes scholar space. And so one of our librarians offered that as a good place to make these reports, once they're generated, electronically available to the community. So I was happy to hear a lot of the comments, and now happy to have the opportunity to stand before you and offer my own insights, and insights that were gleaned from the conversations I've had about the topic. But it is a very valuable benefit that the faculty and administration and staff have, that we can we hope continues. I guess with regard to the numbers, I think it's already been said. It takes a year, about a year, to line up some of these projects, and that means if you're working with someone in a research endeavor, lining up support letters on their end, timing when you say, okay, I'm going to take the sabbatical in the fall, and they're making plans that you be there in the fall, or that students are impacted, and then if a project's approved and you hire a replacement to be available for you in that particular semester, those kinds of considerations are obviously there if there's a reconsideration after the fact. And so if you look at the sabbatical application, there are a couple of places where the supervisor signs off in advance of the project going forward, after it was approved, and then of course it goes through the process that ultimately winds up in your hands. So if there's ever a procedure or process that's a model for rigorous, peer review, it's the sabbatical committee procedure. So much so, those of you who are involved with negotiations might recall when we had a discussion about emeritus, immediately we turned to the process of how can we model it after what's done with sabbaticals. If we want to improve something, it's a very well-oiled machine, so to speak. So, do you have any questions of me with regard to for me regarding the sabbaticals?
I think we are all far better educated about it now than we were before, and that's the process that we should be going through. So I appreciate, it sounds like to the chemistry professor, that's kind of the model. If you can share it with faculty and share it with students, and that is the value add that we would all cherish and reward up here, I think.
Absolutely.
So that's
I think
very
it-
helpful.
Yeah, I think it's been very helpful. And, one of the counselors sabbatical, Dave Ellis, I'm looking forward to that one because I think that's an area that the remedial, how do you reach those students? That's an area that I'm very interested in, and I'd like to help raise some funds to help him accomplish some things there. So I support the process. It's been very good to hear, and I think maybe some undue stress on some people that I brought this up, but I think it's been a good discussion, and I think we continue sabbaticals, but let's make the process
I second that.
little better.
Yeah.
Trustee Cross?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, thank you. I just would like to communicate, and I think many of you know that I do support the sabbatical process. I do, however, thank Trustee Stewart for raising the issue, because I think in the time of a budget crisis, that we have a duty to turn over every stone. So I think it's good that we can raise this up as an example that we really are overturning every stone and looking at what's on the other side, because I think you were here earlier, Dr. Williams, it really is a budget crisis. So I appreciate your time on this.
I'm sure there's some more stones to overturn.
Well, we'll be happy to help answer any questions that you may have.
You have some other items.
I do have, I passed out an article, and I wanted to actually start with a discussion of, one of the many things that we're gearing up for as Faculty Association is negotiations, as you may know. So other items easily to, cross off the list, strategic planning, task force, our involvement in that. Everyone's really excited to be a part of those committees, those task forces, and we're all interested in hearing updates and providing opportunities for the reps to do that in Faculty Association and other forums. But negotiation is on our mind, and we've had many conversations since I've returned officially around that theme. And I had a conversation actually earlier today with Dr. Korb, and we were talking about, kind of getting the process started. And I said, I have something for you guys, and I wasn't sure, what form to deliver it, but I can give you some background on this. The article, I passed out an article, and it's titled, "Which Form Will Your Negotiation Take? Art, Drama, Combat, or Symphony? Why, When, and How to Exercise Each Option, and Sometimes More." And it was written by a pretty prominent attorney in, as he would say, Scranton, Pennsylvania, who I had the pleasure of co-presenting a CLE workshop at a New York City Bargaining Academy that I've been presenting and attending for now about probably 6 years. And so I was matched up with Robert. I didn't know him, but I was to be the faculty presenter, and he was to be the management presenter. And he presented this, and I think it's dated, 2011, 2012 was that time period. And it was what our comments, where the reviewers basically described it as a dance. It was one of the most enjoyable experiences I ever had, because he's a very interesting man, very successful attorney. But he put together this analogy to negotiations like an orchestra, and ideally where it can go if everyone both sides of the table, and he understands both sides, but he's obviously not a faculty member, so he's not at the table as an academic advocate. But he goes through each of those and how, depending on the relationships, really, things can go a particular direction. Ideally, we want symphony. So I'll let you peruse this article, and I'll provide it to any of the members of the negotiation team, and my own, of course. But So what I would like to call your attention to the end, it's like kind of like the old saying, begin with the end in mind. He writes, with a really conversational style, a readable style, which is not always the case with attorney communications, but he, under his end well or as well as you possibly can, he says, never be controlled by anger or frustration of the moment, nor the euphoria of a victory. Remember that in labor, unlike most other forms of contest established by statute or regulation, we see each other again and again and again and again. Therefore, every negotiation should end with some measure of contentment with the achievements or successes realized, but checked by the recognition that not everything could be achieved for everyone. 2, 3, or even 4 years roll around fast, and if you leave the table with a bad taste, that taste is bound to be the only remaining sense that people have when they come in or back the next time around, even those who weren't there the last time. So I thought, if we begin with the end in mind, and the end is, this ideal symphony state, and you can read more closely about what that means, he kind of walks us through, knowing your own party and your goals, and really, if you're bound to a particular style just based on, or a category based on relationships and constraints of whatever type, negotiation as a combat is described, when, how, risks and so on, just as much as negotiation as drama or symphony. And I'm striving, the end goal that I have in mind for this process is to have it be the best possible outcome for this institution. We're doing interest-based bargaining, so the emphasis is on mutual interests, and we have many. And I have faith in the members of our team and the members of the board team, administrative team, that we can get to that place. So if this helps frame that discussion or that process, I'm hopeful that it will do that. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions for Deb? Thank you. It looks like an interesting article, just glancing through it.
You'll enjoy
And
it.
I know that Trustee Stewart would join me in saying, since it's written by an attorney, it's probably really, really good.
Welcome back, Dr. Wayne.
Thank you
And
so much.
if you would allow me to have us thank Ron, who did a great
sure.
job in your absence. I think he did a great job. He missed you, but he was an able replacement.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnson County Research Triangle, no meeting. The next meeting is April 6th, 2015, for the Johnson County Research Triangle Board. I'll just note, you can go to www.jocotriangle.com to learn about the receipts from that, the taxes, what each university gets, and when our next meeting is, and meeting minutes. So if you want to know more about how we're spending that 1/8 cent sales tax on the 3 university projects, you can go to jocotriangle.com. Kansas Association of Community College Trustees would be Dr. Cook. I don't think there's been a meeting since the last report. Foundation report, Trustee Cross.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The Foundation Executive Committee met on this past Tuesday evening in the ATB. Dr. Sopcich toured the committee through the building to improve awareness of the programs housed in the facility. A brief discussion followed related to possible facility improvements to enhance those academic offerings. The Executive Committee also reviewed the mid-year fundraising report, which I'll get to in a moment. This report summarizes all and compares all foundation income July 1 through December 31st over the past 4 fiscal years. Gifts are trending comparable to last year, which is very positive. In fact, the foundation reported a grand total fundraising number of $1.188 million, up from last year, although down from 3 years ago. So it's still a good number, and shows tremendous support that the community has for our college and its foundation. Friends with Taste will host an event on February 13th. That's my birthday, in the Hospitality and Culinary
Let's get
Academy.
that out to February 13th.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, if you note that, please. The dinner, called A Taste for Fashion, Dining and Dressing Through 4 Decades, is a unique collaboration between the college's hospitality, fashion, and merchandising and history departments. Please visit the foundation website for more information. The Executive Committee will meet again on March 10th, followed by a director's meeting on March 24. Foundation Annual Luncheon will be held at noon on May 19th. The campus location will be determined later in the spring. And this concludes the report of the foundation. This concludes the foundation report, and unless there's any questions.
Questions? If not, we've reached the consent agenda on our board agenda. The consent agenda is an opportunity to take routine items and act collectively on them. Is there any item on the consent agenda that anybody would like to remove from the consent agenda? If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. That concludes our regular agenda. We do have an executive session tonight. I know you think I need lots of help. That'd be the third version of this I've been offered. So, I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing consultations with the board's bargaining representation in the employer-employee negotiations to protect the public interest in negotiating a fair and equitable contract in the form of a symphony. The session will last no more than 30 minutes. No action will be taken during this session. We'd like to invite Joe Sopcich, Terry Schlicht, Judy Korb, Barbara Larson, Becky Sentlever, Susan Ryder, Andy Anderson, Tanya Wilson, and Melody Rail to join the executive session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's unanimous. We will start the executive session at 6:25, be out at 6:55. We're back in open session at 6:55. After our executive session, no action was taken. There's nothing else on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned. Thank you all.